Number one, we want you to learn how important ethics education is, and we have a prime teacher of this in International Paper because they have been on the Ethisphere list of most ethical companies for 13 years now. So they've just had that recognition again, so let's give them. We want you to learn more about being a strong business ethics thinker, and that is important because the research indicates that business schools are graduating students with a lower level of ethics awareness than most employers would like. And that's why it's so wonderful that International Paper has been willing to volunteer to help us in that education, because you're going to learn real-world ethics culture today. A couple of other things that you're going to learn today. First of all, look around this wonderful room. Is this not a beautiful environment to be in terms of working, a workplace? That's the kind of thing we want you to think about, where you want to be in your career. Envision the kind of professional that you would want to be. I also want to talk just a minute about opportunities when you come in and out. There's some sheets there. Next Thursday, we have our internship fair, and while I have you all collected here, I have to advertise this one more time. And just in case you don't read the next 12 emails that I'm going to be sending to you. And it's important, we have 69 companies who will be there wanting to hire Fogelman business majors, so please be there, be prepared. The other thing I want to stress to you is that International Paper will also be there, so continue that connection. They have a special Pizza with Professionals event that has space limited. How many of you think it would just be really, really great to have a career with International Paper? All right, I like that kind of, and certainly IP is an employer of choice, so you have a lot of opportunity to learn more about them. This is going to be a very interactive session today, and so when they might find a way for you to have a mic, make sure you say your name, say your major clearly so everybody can get to know you. I do have one group of students that I want to do a special shout out to, and this is exciting. And we have a team of the Society of Human Resource Management students. And if you will stand, the 6 of you, these students are special because they brought home the #1 prize in the National SHRM Convention competition in Houston. So we are incredibly proud of them. They competed against 20 schools. One just final thing that I would like to say is I'd like for you to learn about giving back. And one of the things that our champion in this program is the person on the screen and in the nice blue scarf there, and she has been a wonderful champion to grow this for about 5 years. The General Counsel, Sharon Ryan, has been not only a true leader in wanting the students to learn and to be the best students that they could be, but she also cares about our community. She cares about our opportunity to be one of the best cities that we can be. And so when you are in a professional role, think about what she and her team have done to make this really a wonderful opportunity to learn and to give back. True opportunities have to have champions, and she's been our champion in this. And let's give her a hand. I'm going to stop talking so that our MC, Deanne Vaughn, the Deputy General Counsel, will be able to get us kicked off and tell us more. So let's give Deanne a hand.
Kathy, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Great. Well, as she mentioned, I'm Deanne Vaughn. I'm the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, and I do a number of other things within our law department here. We are very glad to have you here, and you look so good. I saw ties. Everybody looks great. So thanks for coming. Welcome to all of the faculty and all of our International Paper employees in the back, along the back two rows towards the wall here. So I want to talk first about safety. This is incredibly important at International Paper. We're a manufacturing company, but accidents don't always happen in a manufacturing setting. They can happen in an office setting as well. So just a quick, if there's a fire alarm that goes off, you go out these doors to the right and into that parking garage until the attendant tells you that there's been an all clear. We also have, we live in Memphis and it's springtime, so there could potentially be tornadoes. For those that do a lot of weather watching, that would be me. And I'm always looking for when is the next tornado coming? That could potentially be Friday night, but again, that's not that far away. So if there is a tornado siren, out these doors to the left, and there's, right before you go out the glass doors, there's a large hall called Poplar. Through, there are 2 sets of double doors, and that's our tornado safety area. Let me also remind you that if you could please turn cell phones at least on silent. And restrooms are out these doors to the left and then a quick right, and they're both along that left wall as you're walking out towards the door. So let me talk a little bit about our process for today. We have a great lineup of speakers here. We have Nicole Walthauer, who's sitting here at the end. Nicole is our Deputy Ethics and Compliance Officer. Next to her is all of our bosses. Sharon Ryan, who's the Senior Vice President and General Counsel. Next to Sharon is Donna Doss. I know as some of you were coming in, I heard that you were supply chain majors. I think you might have been one of them. Donna is a director in our sourcing organization. I think he's going to talk quite a bit about ethics within the sourcing process as well. And then at the end we have Art Fierro. Art is a fairly new employee at International Paper, and I think is going to have some really interesting stories, and feel free to ask questions. Art is our head of security, our chief security officer. And he comes to us with more than 2 decades at the FBI. Yes, some of it was undercover. There are some great stories. You might not hear any of them, though. Then he also spent a little bit of time at 20th Century Fox out in Los Angeles as their head of security. Also some really good stories that you're probably not going to hear as well about protecting some of the actors under contract, those kinds of things. So we have a great lineup for you. The process for today, informal. If you have questions, please step to the 2 mics that are towards the back, and feel free to ask questions during the panel session. And then if we have a lot of shy people between each session, some of our lawyers in the back are going to be posing some hypotheticals, asking some questions. And they're going to have this little walk-around mic. So everybody be prepared that they have carte blanche to be asking pretty much anyone their opinions on some of these ethical situations that they'll be raising. There are no wrong answers. Ethics can sometimes be a gray area where it is exceedingly important that you are talking to people about what kinds of things that you're doing or considering before you do them. So hopefully it will be really interesting for you, and the afternoon will just fly by. So I will turn it over now to Sharon Ryan, who will walk us through her presentation on ethics.
So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's going to be a great afternoon, and I think my favorite is going to be the 2:30 that we're going to have a break and get to meet with people. And we have some lawyers that have come in the back and some of our HR professionals. So they're going to be here to meet and greet you, so I hope you enjoy that time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about International Paper's core values, which are commitment, ownership, responsibility, and excellence. Could somebody in the audience please tell me why they're called core values? Yes?
Because it's spelled out core.
Very good. You get a prize. There you go. I was told I wasn't allowed to throw anything, but we have somebody here. So what does all that mean? Well, commitment is we're committed to do what's in the interest of our shareholders. We're committed to each other. We're committed to the company. And as Dean said, we're committed to the safety of our employees. And we also support the welfare of the communities in which we live and work. One of those communities is Memphis, but we also have many other communities around the country and around the world. And part of our goal is with our foundation that we do give money to those communities in which we live and work. The other one is ownership. And that's what we're talking about here, that we're really committed to owning the spirit of the law. We do what's right no matter what, even if it's maybe not the easiest thing to do or if it's going to cost us money. We're going to have ownership in what we do. And also responsibility. We treat each other with respect. We treat each other with dignity. And we have a diversity of thought, culture, and everything that we do. And I think that as you find when you talk to the people at International Paper and during the networking time, you'll see that people really have a lot of respect for each other. We have friendship with each other. We care about each other. We want people to go home safe every day. And that's really part of our responsibility. And also excellence. And I have a quote here. I think this really aligns very well with the University of Memphis Professional Development Center, which you're all part of. And I was going through your schedule, and it's just amazing. You pretty much can have something to do almost every day with the program that you have this spring. And how many have you done the different areas? I saw one of them was etiquette when you're eating. I probably could go through that course and learn something too. But I think the programs are very good, and there's a lot of different activities. And I'm very proud of you that you go through that. I know it's not credit, but you're getting something that's really important as you look for jobs, which is learning how to be ethical, learning how to treat each other with respect and dignity. So that's part of our culture. And with that, we're going to show you a short video. That was one of the videos that we had our last officers meeting, and I thought it really showed a lot about International Paper. As you go through your manufacturing facilities, one of the things that we do is we ask you to have hearing protection. I think we should have had that for this video. Thank you, Cecilia, for that. So leading your people. It's really important to lead with integrity, and I also noticed that one of the themes that you have is know good, do good, and thrive. And the way that we lead our people is we have a tone at the top. So you have senior executives at International Paper, just like you would have at University of Memphis with your deans, some of which are here, and your professors. But you also have to not just have that tone at the top, which is making sure that those people know to lead with integrity. But you have to have that tone at the middle and throughout the organization. And that's a big thing that we talk about here with our managers is the tone in the middle. And you'll hear about that as we go through our program. And then leading by example is very important. So whenever you walk in the room, people are watching you. That's one of the things I've learned in my almost 30 years at International Paper. When you walk into a room, make sure you do it very professionally. You do it friendly. You talk to people. You go to those persons in the room that maybe aren't sitting with someone. And that's really some of the ways that we at International Paper show that we care about you and that we're friends with you, is leading by example. And then I like to say we want to create a unified vision. And if you look up on the screen, International Paper's legal department, every year we have a theme. 2 years ago, it was drive your development. And the whole idea there was making sure that what you do, you're driving your own development. People can't do it for you. You need to figure out what you want to do and try to make that thing happen. Last year, one of our themes was make your mark, make a difference, and impact IP. And we were trying to really think about the legal department. We are part of International Paper, but we're not a financial center. We don't make money for the company, but we can make a positive impact. And then this year, our theme is All Together, One Legal. And the idea there is that throughout the country and throughout the world, we not oftentimes really see each other every day, but we have to learn how to work together. And in our legal department, we have litigators, which are some in the back of the room, human resources attorneys, business attorneys, and they all need to really work together. So ethical leaders have qualities that inspire others to achieve positive results while living up to the values of the company. As Kathy already let you know, we did win for the 11th year in a row, and we're very proud of that. It's something that very few companies have achieved, to be able to do it for 11 years. And it really is part of our tone at the top and the middle and throughout the company. So why do you want to lead with integrity? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. I always tell the story of why you do things the right way. I mean, you do things the right way because it's the right way to do things. That's really the most important. Don't do things the right way because you think somebody else expects you to do it. It really is something that's in your heart. But integrity does a lot of things for a company. You hear about it, I'm sure, from your families, from your parents, but we talk about it at International Paper because it is what really makes us be a great company. It also leads to decreased misconduct, more employee engagement. So you don't want to work at a company that's done bad things. I mean, you don't want to walk into a company that you feel like they're not ethical, that you have to go home and tell your family or your sister that you're working for a company that has done something wrong. So that's another good reason. Also, you have better employee performance. You have stronger long-term financial results. And Ethisphere talks about that when they've come out with the award every year, that it's the companies that are the most ethical that have the best financial results. It protects the company's reputation and brand. Another big thing for the lawyers in the room is being ethical really protects you from having liability. So if you're not an ethical company, you could have the government come after you, the IRS, you have individuals coming after you, and you're going to spend a lot of money on litigation if you're not an ethical company. And then for you personally, I think that leading with integrity, and you'll hear that throughout the presentations today, really gives you better opportunity for advancement. So at International Paper, every year we do CSAs, we call them contribution summary assessments. And part of what we look at is making sure that the people that work for us are ethical. And you as students, I know you have a code of conduct, just like we have a code of conduct. That's important. But as you go through your careers, wherever you decide to work, you're going to want to lead and you're going to be able to work in a way in which you have an ethical compass. And those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dean.
So thank you, Sharon. Appreciate that. If there are questions for Sharon, we can certainly take those now,
Or you can wait till the end.
or you can wait till the end. So in light of that, I will ask our labor employment lawyer, Jessica Neal, to read one of the questions, hypotheticals, and then have a conversation with you and have you participate. So a two-way conversation in this between sessions here.
Okay. Can you hear me? Jorge motivates through intimidation and uses profanity directed at individuals. Last week, he humiliated Mike in front of the whole crew using language so profane that it can't be repeated here. No one complains about Jorge because his style seems to be working. His crew's numbers are the best in the facility. Is Jorge's behavior right or wrong, and why?
Say your name, Darius.
Darius Wade, University of Memphis student, also junior business management, concentration in human resource management. I believe his conduct is wrong because you shouldn't treat people that way, not only because of business ethics, but because of his moral. He should have some type of inner way of feeling about it that way. But everybody comes from different backgrounds, but he still should be able to conduct himself, which is proper and correct for business as well.
Anybody else?
Sam Schultz, University of Memphis, junior, major is business information technology. Basically, I would agree with him, but also, you have to be a good example. So him being the best and then him putting down other people, it's not leading by example. So that would not count as integrity.
Good.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Hi, I'm Raylan Lewis. I'm a senior finance major with a concentration in banking and financial services. I would definitely say that it's inappropriate, but I also look at the fact that people are motivated differently. So just because his scores are higher, you should also look at like the retention of people staying in his department. Also look at motivations, because some people may be motivated through intimidation, but there are other people who look at other forms of motivation. So it's unethical, but eventually it's going to show. Might not show any scores, but it might show somewhere else.
Anybody else?
Jessica, we have some finance people over here. So how is it that you reconcile the incredible results of this person to their method of harsh management?
Hi, my name is Andrew Blaine. I'm an international business major, not finance, but I would look at the financial aspect of it and being able to reconcile it, based on the fact that he's taking an unethical approach, and eventually that will cost the company in liability and whatnot as well, because those employees can be able to raise suit or raise complaints with a number of other agencies and regulators. So, eventually that is going to catch up, and it's going to end up costing, even though his performance may be great, it's going to cost the company much more money in liability and lawsuits and things that could potentially cause, delay production or what have you.
Jessica, can I answer
Nice.
too a thought? Which reminded me of what you're saying. That's one of the other things is sometimes when you see somebody performing unethically in one place, it could be that he's doing something somewhere else. So if he's working in the financial area, you might want to wonder if his behavior here might lead over to another one. So let's hear a little bit about the supplier, how we treat suppliers at International Paper.
We will do that.
Thank you,
you all.
Jessica.
Donna?
So I guess before I get started, how many supply chain degrees do we have in the room? All right. Okay. Supply chain. Good.
There's a job for those that have supply chain.
So over the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, we're going to talk about ethics in the supply chain. So as a company who operates ethically and responsibly, we expect that our business partners operate ethically and responsibly as well. So you might say, well, what do those business partners look like? They could be manufacturers, they could be carriers, they could be distributors, they could be consultants, they could be brokers. And those are just to name a few, but those are the main ones. And so when you think about our supply chain and how we operate, it's really that we want them to behave ethically and responsibly. So in 2012, the compliance team and the sourcing team got together, and they tried to figure out how do we look at our sourcing process and how do we look at our supply chain in order to manage any potential risk that are related to compliance issues, and what type of processes and procedures might we put in place that would allow us to better either identify, mitigate, monitor, check, and even, in some cases, possibly audit. So we got together, we put together this entire program because what we wanted to do as a company, we're really good at looking at quality and performance and those types of things, but we needed a way to vet suppliers with regards to compliance-related risk issues. And so we put this formal process together that we can vet all of our suppliers through. And it really allowed us now to have a full-fledged process around quality, performance, price, and risk. So how many, if you look at the slide here, we're talking about setting ethical expectations. So when you think about expectations, how did we do that as a company? Well, first of all, we put together what is called a supplier code of conduct. You might say, well, how different is that than a company code of conduct? It really is the same principles, the same guidelines, the same expectation, except that it becomes more in the face of our suppliers so that we have a direct dialogue with the suppliers in our supply chain. So how many of you have ever been to Wolf Chase Mall? Everybody's been there. I was just there during the holidays, right? So as you walk into the main entrance, you'll see they have this giant sign and it says Code of Conduct. So anyone who walks into that building is expected to behave in accordance with the code and the conduct that's built inside of that format. And if you don't, there are consequences to that behavior, right? So if you look at what that does is that makes that code of conduct very public. And what you'll find, oftentimes very typical with companies, is they make their code of conduct or their supplier code of conduct very visible and public. You want it to be visible and public because when it is, then anyone can see it and they can understand what principles that you stand on, what values, what are those expectations that you have as a company. So if you go to internationalpaper.com, you will find International Paper's Code of Conduct out on our website, as well as you will see International Paper has our supplier code of conduct. Now, International Paper is a very large company, and we're in 24 countries. So we have 19 different versions, different languages, not versions, languages of the code of conduct that's on the website. So you might ask, well, why would you have all of that? Because we want, no matter where you are in the world, you can go to that website and you can see what our expectations are of you as a supplier or a business partner to International Paper. So we're in 24 countries. I just told you that. Does anybody here have any idea how many suppliers we're talking about? Somebody just call out a number.
10,000.
Good number. A little bit higher. 100,000. Good one. It's almost 100,000 suppliers across the globe. 60% of our suppliers are here in the United States. So you can see that we have a vast array of suppliers across the globe. So, which makes it a point that we need to have a very well thought out process when we start assessing compliance risk in our supply chain. And one of the things that we've started training our buyers across the globe is that we want them to be able to recognize red flags in our supply chain. We want them to be able to recognize how to identify, how to evaluate, how to mitigate, how to investigate, and possibly raise any risks or concerns that might lead us as a company to go and audit those suppliers. So you can see with a very vast program how difficult it might be with 100,000 suppliers, right? But let me tell you what's really great about International Paper. We have what is called a global strategic sourcing process. That global strategic sourcing process is the same process no matter where you are. If you're in India, if you're in China, if you're in France, or if you're in the US, it is the same sourcing process. So what we did was we enhanced that sourcing process because, as I told you earlier, we look at value, we look at performance, we look at quality, and now we look at risk. So we enhanced our process to capture those risk elements within our supply chain. So with that, we can turn it to the next slide. So companies today are being increasingly held to be accountable to unethical and illegal actions, and that occurs in the supply chain. So what basically companies are being asked to do is you need to know your supply chain. You need to know what's going on, and you need to hold those suppliers accountable. So we're gonna talk about these three companies, of all which everyone in here knows them because their brands are very prominent in the market, right? So let's look at Avon. So I'm gonna kind of go through a little scenario and then kind of explain to you maybe how some of these companies were fined, or at least it impacted their company because they didn't have the right processes and procedures in place. So let's look at Avon. The DOJ Justice News put this report out. So the SEC charged Aon with violating the Foreign Corruption Practices Act, FCPA, by failing to put controls in place to detect and prevent payments and gifts to the Chinese government officials from employees and consultants at a subsidiary. So Aon ended up paying approximately $135 million in criminal and regulatory penalties. Aon's subsidiary in China made $8 million in payments in the form of gifts, entertainment, and travel to the Chinese officials implementing and overseeing direct selling regulations in China.
Could we just, we have several lawyers in the back of the room. For the people who maybe don't know this, could somebody explain in the back of the room what the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is and why it's bad to violate it? Alan.
Well, one thing the FCPA, as it's known, it does is prohibit payments to foreign government officials in exchange for, with the intent of influencing the decisions by that foreign government official. And another thing it does is impose a lot of record-keeping requirements, books and records requirements.
So I
But the
just wanted
first
to
one
make
is
sure
the one
everybody knew.
that we're talking about here, which is you can't make payments essentially to bribe government officials into getting what you want for your company.
Thanks.
Yes,
And
thank
then
you.
the other thing I'd like to say, just, we're not saying that these companies are bad companies.
No.
Avon, I use Avon, we all use it for our mosquito bites in the summertime. Costco, I shop there, and my daughter works at Walmart. So we're not saying that these are bad companies. These are just companies that didn't have the processes in place and really had some issues. And part of it is the remediation that they
That's
do.
exactly right. So through this process, what we found with Avon is that they ended up putting a process in place that would better allow them to detect and prevent those types of activities in their company. And they put in extraneous amounts of training to explain to their employees, hey, this is how we need to behave. This is how we need to operate with regards to government officials. So I'm just trying to explain to you that having processes and procedures in place is a really, really important piece of how we need to think about compliance as it relates to risk in the supply chain. So let's look at the next one, Costco. Costco was one of 4 companies that were implicated in selling shrimp linked to slave labor. So at a Thailand-based CP Food, the world's largest shrimp and prawn farmer purchased fish meal, and fish meal it's not edible. It's actually kind of trash fish that they get out of the ocean, and they basically use it to feed shrimp in order to raise shrimp in shrimp farms. And so they used, CP Foods used these small boats that would then collect these trash fish or fish meal for the CP Foods' fish farm. And what they found was that they were using manned slave labor from Cambodia and Myanmar in order to collect this fish meal. And so many of these men who came out of Myanmar and other areas were being held against their own will, right? And so if you think about the ethical way that companies need to behave and how they need to act, now Costco didn't know that this was going on because guess what? It's not their first direct supplier. It was way down in their supplier. So they had to then go back and put processes in place to then check down in their supply chain where they could then monitor and manage those types of activities going on in their supply chain. So it's not like it was just the first supplier down. It was way down deep in their supply chain. So let's look at this last one here, Walmart. Walmart in 2012, the New York Times article alleged a widespread FCPA violation in Walmart's Mexico operation, but the Justice Department investigation decided to expand that beyond Mexico, and they started looking at places like their operations in India and in China and in Latin America. So this past fall, Walmart has been reviewing this $600 million settlement proposed by prosecutors, and so this litigation still goes on, is my point. But the report that Walmart's FCPA compliance expense might even reach as high as $800 million. And part of that is because Walmart then put in a compliance risk-related program so that they could go and check these types of things in their supply chain. Not only was it the 800 towards building their compliance program, but also the penalties and then some of the travel expenses and things of that sort. So you can see, my point to you is that it is really important that companies pay attention and that not only do we know what's going on in our own company, but we really need to know what's going on in our supply chain. Any questions? Okay, so this next slide here is really, so at International Paper, we have a saying, we do the right things for the right reasons in the right way all the time. And so we extend that same philosophy to our suppliers in our supply chain. We want every supplier to behave ethically and act responsibly when doing business. So our Supplier Code of Conduct is the foundation of our supply chain sustainability program. So if you think about how we as a company operate, when we think about how to build out processes and procedures and processes and procedures within our supply chain, the foundation of that is our Supplier Code of Conduct. It's the basis of everything that we do and how we think about that whole process. So the Supplier Code of Conduct is also something that we have attached to all of our agreements. So if you think about it, we just talked about it, we're in 24 countries, right? We have 100,000 suppliers. So in our standard templates, in our PO terms, we have our Supplier Code of Conduct in every one of those agreements as part of how we do business. So it formalizes our expectations, if you think about it like that, of that expectation to those suppliers. You'll turn to the next slide. Okay, so this is really a snapshot. This has been really important in how we talk about International Paper around the globe to our suppliers. And we translated this into several languages as well. And it's a summary of our Supplier Code of Conduct. So I'm going to go through just a couple of the points on there. I'm not going to go through everything. But if you look at this, safety. So you heard Sharon talk earlier. Safety is a core value here at International Paper, and we want everyone to go home every day the same way they came to work. If we think about safety, we want our suppliers to have that same philosophy, to have those same values. We want them to train their employees around safety. We want them to focus on safety. We want them to wear the right personal protective equipment when they go out on jobs that they need to in order to be as safe as possible. So safety is very core to International Paper. If you look at the social side here, we talk about we want everyone treated with dignity and respect. We want everyone to be treated fairly. We also want employees and we want our suppliers to offer a way that their employees, because we offer a way for our employees, if you have a concern, you can go and you can have a discussion with someone about that issue or that concern that you might have. So we want a way that they can vet those concerns throughout their companies with their employees. And then if you notice up here, there's a one that talks about prohibiting forced labor, child labor, and human trafficking. And I get asked the question a lot, is this really, is this a big issue in the global market? If you think about the global market in itself, well, the ILO, which is the International Labor Organization, put out in 2014 that there are more than 21 million individuals that are victims of modern-day slavery. And if you equate that to what that revenue looks like, that revenue is somewhere around $150 billion annually. So yes, companies need to be aware of how their supply chains are operating and what they're doing in their supply chains. The environmental, we want the companies we deal with to be efficient, responsible with the resources that they use. We want to make sure that they consume responsibly. We want to make sure that if you think about how they think about their own supply chain, are they looking at greenhouse gases? Are they looking at how they manage waste? Are they looking at the things that really add up to being a responsible company doing responsible business? Because a responsible company, we want to be around for the next 100 years. And in order for us to be around for the next 100 years, we need our suppliers to be around for the next 100 years. So them acting ethically and doing the right thing and following the laws in the land in which they operate is very important to us and our supply chain. You'll turn to the next slide. All right, so this is my last slide, and this is kind of a cornerstone. It's what we call our strategy document. So when you see International Paper talking about its supply chain and how it relates back to ethics, this really sums it up. So as a company, we want to make sure that we have transparency. And transparency means we need to have processes and procedures in place. We need to be checking within our supply chain. We need to be monitoring and investigating. So that's one thing. The other thing is we want to align with our global citizenship organization so that we are consistent in how we talk about what we're doing in the supply chain and what targets and goals we set for ourselves as a company. If you look at the risk side of this, we need to have a strategic sourcing process that's standard across the globe, that any buyer that comes into that job understands how to look, how to mitigate, how to monitor. They need to understand what those risk elements are and how they check for them. So having a risk management program that's well thought out is really important in a sourcing organization. We need to have the right policies. We need to have the right practices in order to reduce those risks. And then lastly, partnerships. This is a really important one. So we have suppliers that we partner with because they have some of the same views, or they look at the same things that we do with regards to maybe reducing energy consumption or looking at improving water quality, those types of things. We work with. Last year, we also had a summit where we worked with suppliers on safety. So we brought in over 60 suppliers in our supply chain and talked about best safety practices. So those types of collaborative efforts where we can share what we're doing internally and we can share with our suppliers only sets the stage for companies understanding and working together to make it the right thing in the right way for the right reasons, and that we all work to improve how we work together. I think that's my last slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to...
Back to me. Thank you, Donna. Very much appreciate that. And I think we have time for maybe one or two of our ethical questions, dilemmas, and Kevin Mackey is going to do the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Dean. I just happened to think of a question that I wanted to ask you people. So we just heard International Paper has 100,000 suppliers in the world, 60,000 in the United States. So think about that. We have an employee, Ronnie, who works at International Paper. And an ink supplier, we do use ink at International Paper. We print on our boxes. We print on the paper cups that we make for a lot of our companies. He asked Ronnie to do some consulting work for him on the side on the weekends. And Ronnie could really use the extra money. And I'm changing this a little bit. Do you think it's okay for Ronnie to accept that job to do some consulting work? And if so, is there anything he needs to do? Great.
My name is Grade Mazer. I'm a supply chain major, junior. If Ronnie's really hurting for money, I think he needs to go through the proper levels of management and, report it to, his boss before accepting the job. But absolutely, I think he should go, improve his portfolio and work experience.
Good answer. So, right, is that ink supply, is that going to be a conflict of interest? Or maybe not. But the important thing is, before he takes the job, is that he discloses it to his supervisor. And you probably wouldn't know this, but another thing that we have at International Paper, and I think a lot of companies may have, is there's a conflict of interest disclosure form that you might need to complete and run that up the chain to the ethics office so that the company, so IP can look at it and talk to Ronnie about things he might need to do to make sure he doesn't have a conflict before he takes the job. So that was a great answer. Anybody else have any other comments about that?
Kevin, I want to ask a question about your question.
Certainly.
So I have a question. Would it be okay if during the week he worked at a store that sold like Motorola and Nokia and what are the other Android phones. You can tell I'm an old lady. Would it be okay to do that? And then during the week, when people ask him about the phone, he says, these phones are okay, but really come to see me at the Apple store on Saturday because I have a great iPhone 7. Would that be okay to do?
You asking me or are we asking?
No, I'm asking the students.
Man, because I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, Apples are better phones, aren't they? You're doing a favor,
Some opinions, yeah.
aren't you?
So, what you're saying then is that you've got somebody who's working for you at the, T-Mobile, and they're, or wherever they're working, but they're working somewhere, and they're supposed to be selling phones for T-Mobile. But on the weekends, they work at the Apple store, and everybody knows that iPhones are better than Androids and all those others. So this person would just kind of, on the side, hand out his card and say, look, I can get you an iPhone, I can get you a deal on it, come see me on Saturday.
Yeah, that's helping the community.
Yeah, because it is better if everyone in the world has iPhones.
That's right.
That's the way. So is that okay?
Good morning. My name is Cassandra Nash, senior and accountant. No, it is not. One thing is that there's a conflict of interest definitely between the two companies, the two different brands of phones. If you're working in one setting, it is not okay to publish something about another company in that same setting. So, no, it's not.
Okay. I guess I'll quit my second job then.
Kevin, I think we have time for another question before we take our break here. So, Susan, do you have a question?
Oh my gosh, I do. And it just came to me. Truly. Yes. Okay. We've heard Donna talking about global sourcing and jobs, and some of you guys are global sourcing majors. So let's say in the next year or so, you're interviewing for your dream job, and you've narrowed it down to 2 companies. Both have really good opportunities in an area you want to be in, and they both have comparable salaries. So you're lucky. Consider yourself lucky. You've got 2 offers. Woo! Okay, but you go online, and you read that one of their global sourcing operations is in trouble and may face some violations from the government. There's some investigations going on. Nothing's, been settled yet, but there's some talk, okay, that they might have some ethical issues. If you're leaning towards that company, does this change your mind? Yes or no? Bueller?
Get some different votes too. I see some. Drew, what would you say?
Which one's good? Hello.
Drew Marshall, Jr. I'm not in global sourcing. I'm in accounting. But what I would do is it could actually strengthen my resolve to work for that company if I communicated with the company and tried to find out what their plans were to address the situation. Because their method of going about dealing with the problem and how they resolve the problem could actually make them more desirable to me, because it would show that they have ethics and they have a good plan in place to deal with issues like that in the future.
Very good answer.
Anybody else? Any other view?
I don't need the money.
Oh, you don't?
Well, I believe with Marshall, Drew said exactly the way you look at it is like a cup of water. You halfway full and halfway empty. You look at a positive way to strengthen your view of the company, or you can lean away from it and just start looking somewhere else. But I agree with Marshall. Drew, Drew, that again, it strengthens your time with the company, because you want to see how they're going to address it, and they can make you feel more comfortable about the company.
Others?
I hate to be the person, Raylan Lewis again, that goes against the grain, but I am I don't think I would want to be associated with a company with allegations of being unethical, and I definitely wouldn't want to walk into something and they're already in the middle of something. So I think personally for me, I would probably choose the other company just because their name is already involved in something.
Do you all think that just because someone brings an allegation against a company that means where there's smoke, there's fire? Or do you think that the company deserves its own day in court to bring its arguments as to whether it was or ethical or not? Thoughts on that?
Hey, I'm Cooper. I'm a management major. I definitely think they deserve a chance to stand in court and to defend themselves. But also, I think Ms. Sharon pointed out earlier that if you see unethical behavior in one area, you may see it in other areas as well. So, sure, they deserve their chance to prove that they're doing things the right way, but I also think you just need to be careful if you do decide to go with that company.
There's somebody, a student? I'd like to make sure that everybody in the room knows that Tom Cadian is here. He's the Senior Vice President. He was in our HR organization, and he is a huge supporter of University of Memphis, and I really appreciate that he's in the room.
Thanks, Sharon. I just want to maybe give a couple live examples to support some of the things on the supply chain. Part of my responsibilities before I was in HR here, I ran some of our businesses around the world. And I'll give you an example in Russia. We have a paper mill in Russia, and we bring in wood fiber and we turn it into paper and packaging materials. And if you think about bringing wood from the woods, we want to have sustainable forestry. So we want to buy from suppliers who are going to not only bring us wood that they cut, but we're going to replant more trees than we're cutting. So we want to leave the forest better than afterwards than it was when we got there. Well, and you also have distance. It costs money to bring fiber on a truck. So ideally, you'd want the wood to come from as close to your mill as you can. Well, in Russia, the government controls the forests. They're owned by the Russian government, and you get what you call concessions. So you have to negotiate with the government on your wood supply. And in Russia, it's generally accepted it's okay to pay bribes to government officials. Well, it's not for international paper. We're governed by the laws of the United States. So a real-life example is where all those wood and trees around your mill, the only way to get them is to pay the government officials the bribes, because they know you want that lowest cost, closest wood. And we don't do that. So we end up paying more and having wood hauled further distances, but we align ourselves with the right kinds of suppliers. Another example, in India, we have a paper mill there, and we collect from suppliers waste paper, and we recycle it, and we turn it into new paper. Well, if you've never been to India, there's a wide disparity of wealth and poverty, and it's not uncommon for children to be collecting waste and paper. So when we go out and find a supplier to supply us with waste paper, we have to make sure they're not using child labor. And we end up paying more for our waste paper because of that. But that's what we do, because we don't want to promote the use of child labor. And then the last example I'll give you is more of a personal example of we sent a U.S. expat, somebody from here in Memphis, to go live in India. So they move into their house, and they have a propane gas stove. And we want to get the propane tanks brought in. For those of you who this is a Paul Brown story. And the only way that Paul could get them to deliver the propane to his home in less than 3 months was to pay a bribe. And Paul, to his credit and his training at IP, he wouldn't even do it when it was at home, because it just kind of cut against the grain of IP values. So those are 3 real-life examples that we have to deal with, whether it's the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or the supply chain or bribes, that when you're part of IP in our culture, that's kind of how we have to live our, and we don't mind living it that way because it's the right thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you to Sharon and Donna. And I think we're right at our 2:30 mark, so we can take our 30-minute break for networking.